And good evening, everybody. I am Carol Peoples Proctor, a proud board member of the Black Heritage Society of Washington State. And on behalf of our beloved partner for well over 20 years, the Museum of History and Industry and BHS, welcome you to When History is Your Story. Before we get started, I just wanted to share a little bit about BHS. I'm so proud that we are all volunteers. And we began in 1977, and our founders were Esther Mumford, the Yarbroughs, Jacqueline E.A. Lawson, Beulah Gayton Johnson, and Mary Henry. The society became incorporated in 1982. And we are dedicated to the acquisition, preservation, and exhibits of our materials relating to history and culture of African Americans in Washington State. We present exhibits for local special events. We recognize African American pioneers regardless of their age and field of endeavors. And we are a premier resource that educates, shares, and collaborates with all communities to uphold the contributions of people of African descent. To get a taste of our very rich collection, visit our website or go to King County Snapshots. But welcome, welcome, welcome. We're so excited that you're here. We love our Museum of History and Industry and our partnership. And with that, I'd like to introduce our president. Stephanie Johnson-Toliver has been our president for 3 years. We're trying to make it a permanent position. Can you help out? Stephanie, you cannot get voted out. So with that, I'd like to turn our program over to Stephanie, our president of the Black Heritage Society.
Oh, hello, everyone. Carol, I don't know about that presidency until, death do us part. I'm not sure about that, but I'm loving it so far. Yes, hello, everyone, and thank you, Carol, my friend and partner and everything BHS. I absolutely love you and couldn't do it without you. Huge thanks and appreciation for our partners at MOHAI for co-presenting tonight's program. It's their tech programming and Zoom skills. It's everything that helps to bring this together for you tonight, in your home. In fact, Carol touched on the fact that we've been partners for a long time with MOHAI. In fact, I consider us, we're an old couple. It was 1980 when MOHAI, was sponsored for our first annual BHS members meeting and Heritage Tea. Oh. And so, you know what, Carol? I think they put a ring on it. We're buddies now forever. So again, building on what Carol said, and I guess, I should describe myself too. We're doing descriptions this evening, and I am a Black woman wearing red glasses. I have my hair pulled back in a bun, and I'm sitting in my living room with Christmas tree lights on. Yes. So with that said, building on what Carol was talking about with our programming and outreach, BHS works to fulfill its purpose every day. We hold an archive of rich histories and legacies. Our shared stories, all of our stories, your stories, our stories, weave a history of pride and presence, and we acknowledge that this month, this Black History Month. And this is why it's important to record and document and preserve them. So I know you'll hear about that tonight. And tonight, in order that, we move along pretty smoothly here, it's my pleasure to introduce community members and friends of BHS who I know in various capacities that center around history and community. Our guests will share the history. History is their story. And as you listen, You'll discover some of what they share may also be your story, and maybe it touches a vein to inspire you to embrace your history. This evening, I will introduce you to the newly elected president of the Seattle Black Genealogy Research Group, Thomas Robinson, as well. So hang in there and wait for that, because you don't want to miss a minute of what everyone has to say, and also Thomas. So I'll get right to it with these introductions. I'll introduce each one, and then I will welcome them to the screen. So tonight, it is my huge pleasure to invite Eddie Rye Jr. He has set a standard for advocacy and activism in Seattle and beyond. Eddie has been involved in the struggle for racial, economic, and social justice for the last 50 years, believe it or not. You know, he is the current host of Urban Forum Northwest Radio, 1150 AM KKNW. Eddie's activism includes the historic effort to rename Empire Way, if you remember that, in King County, to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Way. He'll share what motivates him then and now. And then our second guest is Ryan Donaldson. I've absolutely loved working with Ryan. It's been just over a year now, and he's here tonight wearing his archives and heritage and museum collections hat. He uses his skills to assist and consult with others to highlight histories, but this evening, Ryan is here to tell his own story. He'll be the storyteller this evening. He is a fifth generation grandson of a family who set out to escape slavery in the South to move to Washington State. He will share this amazing journey and how it continues to evolve for him and the rest of his family. And then I don't want to say last, but least, I'm going to give an introduction for the very fabulous Chardonnay Beaver. She is a strong and confident young woman who often uses her voice and uses that voice as a call to action and thought. She established Words of Wisdom by Char, a platform for community engagement and storytelling. Chardonnay is a student at the University of Washington and is a columnist for the Facts newspaper, where she is inspired by her family's media legacy. So with all of that said, I will transition. Let's transition to Eddie. Welcome, Eddie. I want to see your wonderful face.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it very much.
Yeah, we want to hear all you prepared, all you prepared, and will share with us tonight. So I'm going to let you take it away, and I know you have some really fabulous pictures to share too. So I'll step back and let you go for it. Thanks, Eddie.
All right, thank you very much, Stephanie. Appreciate the opportunity. As I indicated, I have been an activist in the Seattle area for over 50 years. My father came here as appointed by A. Philip Randolph to be the president, the Northwest organizer for the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters. The picture that's up now is the United Construction Workers Association, led by Tyree Scott. The gentleman to the right with his hand in his mouth is State Representative Michael K. Ross, Michael Wu, Harley Bird. Those were folks who were making some changes in Seattle. Well, that was like in the 80s. I ran a community action program by the name of the Central Area Motivation Program in the 70s. And during that time, I also chaired the Central Seattle Community Council Housing Federation. And we released the first report on redlining of the Central area. We also work across ethnic lines, like helping El Centro de Raza become a reality. This was an opportunity when we actually had to take over city council. That's me standing up with the hat in Lim Tui, the president of the council's spot. The gentleman to the left, the second person is Roberto Maestas, the founder of El Centro de la Raza. The gentleman sitting at the secretary's desk is former King County Councilmember Larry Gossett. And that's King County Council member, Seattle City Council member Sam Smith, Phyllis Lampier standing at the door. We took over the council that day. I also was involved with a number of activities in terms of trying to bring about economic justice and economic equity. Now, the picture you're seeing right now is a sad note. That was I was a pallbearer, the person with all the hair to the right. That was the Jimi Hendrix funeral at the Dunlap Baptist Church, which is on Rainier Avenue South in Seattle. In addition to that, I hosted a radio program on KYAC radio in the late 70s. Well, actually, all doing it in the 60s and 70s. And in 1980, I was interviewing Reverend Jesse Jackson about an event that Stevie Wonder was having in January 15th, 1981, to impress upon the Congress and demand they make Dr. King's birthday a national holiday. And so Reverend Jackson said, well, since Seattle's so far away, why don't you come up with something local to memorialize Dr. King? And so after about 3 or 4 months and having the radio at our disposal, we were able to collect about 4,000 or 5,000 signatures. We took to the city council and they looked at it for about a year. But before they did anything, they had chopped the street up 3 or 4 different times, but eventually we did prevail. Right now, this was when I was executive director of the Central Area Motivation Program. And you're looking at the gentleman to the far left is Ike Alexander, who was vice president of the student body at the University of Washington. Don Costa Sewell, who was been denied tenure in the University of Washington Law School. I'm the person with all the hair in the middle. And Joe Brazil, who had a very popular class at the University of Washington School of Ethnomusicology School. They were both denied tenure. So I was active in terms of making sure that people had opportunities. In addition to that, we had a program that recruited students to take advantage of various opportunities. Certainly, a lot of issues have come up lately with number 45 being president. There have been some issues like, for example, in 1941, the Daughters of the Confederacy named Highway 99. They named that the Jefferson Davis Highway. And Hans Dunshee, a state representative from Everett, led a charge to change that, take that name off. And eventually in 2017, we were successful in taking Jefferson Davis, the President of the Confederacy's name, off of Highway 99. It went from the Canadian border to the Oregon border. The picture up right there is Reverend Dr. That's Dr. Art Fletcher, who is known as the father of affirmative action. And he's given this, displaying some wisdom or giving Governor Gary Locke some information and some possibilities of restoring affirmative action. I'm to the right, but it didn't work. So for the last 23 years, this is in 1998, we've not had affirmative action in Washington State since 1998. So it's really been one mess after another. Another issue that I was involved with is that a friend of mine by the name of Jonathan Rosenblum, who works for City Council member Shauna Sawant, I went up to the North Cascades and kept seeing these signs of Coon Lake and Coon Creek. And he asked his neighbor, he never sees any raccoons. And the neighbor said, well, we're not talking about that kind of coon. Well, Jonathan got busy and I helped him. And we restored that name to the Black prospector and who homesteaded that property. His name was Wilson Howard. They restored the name to Howard Lake and Howard Creek on the state maps and also in the National Archives. This is a picture of me and Julian Bond in 1984. That was during the time when I was Reverend Jesse Jackson's campaign manager. We won one district that year, but it inspired a lot of people of color and women to run for office. In 1988, under the leadership of the late Charles Rowland, who computerized the program, Reverend Jackson actually won the Democratic nomination for president in Washington State. People still try to mess with it, but that's just a fact. So Reverend Jackson running, it inspired so many other people of color to run. It wasn't funny. They showed up everywhere. A few other things that happened is that in terms of economic justice, in the early late 90s and early 2000s, we had to go around and actually close some construction jobs down once again because of the lack of Black participation. Even though we have all these policies and laws on the books, they're really meaningless if they're not enforced. So we have no choice but to go out and take care of business. Also, I want to mention that we wanted to name Highway 99 for a Civil War veteran who was buried in Snohomish County the William P. Stewart Memorial Highway, but we're still having problems with the Washington State Department of the Washington State Transportation Commission. They're saying that we'll put a sign up by where he's buried, but the whole highway wasn't named for Jefferson Davis. And I said, well, why would you have a marker and a ceremony at the Canadian border and another one at Vancouver, Washington at the Oregon border? So we're still fighting that battle. Right there, this was a grand opening for the Jimi Hendrix Memorial Park, which is right by the African American Museum. And that is world famous coach Lenny Wilkins and outstanding musician Terry Johnson, along with myself. In terms of the education systems that we have that we've been dealing with, but I got to mention this lady here. She got famous the last couple of weeks, and that is Representative Stacey Plaskett out of the Virgin Islands. And I think she did a magnificent job during the impeachment proceedings, and she is a rising star. I mentioned the fact that I was on KYAC radio. It was a Black radio station. It was on for a number of years. Matter of fact, it used to be located on 3rd Avenue in downtown Seattle. In addition to that, I also want to mention that there are five brothers and sisters. One sister, my younger sister, who's a librarian, Brenda, deceased in September. In terms of the other activities I've been involved in 1981, after the interview with Reverend Jackson and changed the name of the street, we got the Mayor Charles Royer signed the bill to officially name the street, but some people at the south end of the street filed a lawsuit, and the mayor refused to put the signs up. So January 15th, 1983, we organized the first march, Martin Luther King March, which still goes on today, to protest the city of Seattle not putting up the Martin Luther King signs, and also demanding that the Congress makes Dr. King's birthday a national holiday. Later that year, on November 2nd, 1983, President Ronald Reagan signed legislation making Dr. King's birthday the third Monday in 1986. And 4 weeks later, on November 30th, 1983, the Washington State Supreme Court ruled the city of Seattle had the authority to change the name of Empire Way to Martin Luther King Jr. Way. Now that's my friend April Ryan. She's a White House correspondent with American Urban Radio. And that was at an event that I attend every year since COVID. I haven't been able to, but that was at a brunch, the National Congress of Black Women, head up by Dr. Ife Williams, who is a columnist that is regular featured in the Seattle Medium newspaper. The Congressional Black Caucus I've been involved with for like the last 12 to 15 years. My daughter Angela was the executive director of the Congressional Black Caucus from 2010 to 2013. And because of her involvement, I've been going back and forth to Washington, D.C. And hoping that we can get some resources back here that they have in Washington, D.C. It's a little different story. But before I close out, I just have to comment on what's happening right now in Washington, D.C. We see 3 people of color who are in line for cabinet positions, and all of a sudden tweets make a difference. But for 4 years, the same people saying that are complaining about this one lady's tweets in particular didn't say anything about Donald Trump's tweets. This picture you're seeing now, that's my daughter Angela to the far left. And these are some folks who received awards at the New York Urban League's annual dinner. And I've been standing in between the Reverend Al Sharpton and a gentleman by the name of Common. So those folks do a lot of work in the community, and I'm proud to be associated with them. So anyway, I will cut it short because I know that we have other presentations, and I'm here for the question and answer section. But if you want to keep going, that's I received the Harold Moss Legacy Award from the Tacoma NAACP. And that to the left is Gail Alexis Ray, the Secretary of the Tacoma branch, myself holding the award, the late Harold Moss, who is now deceased, and then the president of the Tacoma NAACP, Reverend Dr. Gregory Christopher. So if we want to run through these, I can just let you know who was on there, but I was very proud to receive that award. Matter of fact, Harold Moss was the first Black mayor of Tacoma, and he also was been followed by 2 Black females. That would be Marilyn Strickland, who was just elected to Congress representing the 10th District, the first African-American Korean who is our first member of the Congressional Black Caucus. And Reverend Dr. Gregory Christopher is also the senior pastor of Shiloh Missionary Baptist Church in Tacoma as well. So how am I doing, Madam Chair?
Eddie, you're doing absolutely wonderful. And I know this is just barely, enough time for you to be able to share all of your history, your activism. Thank you for your activism and reminding us that, everyone can find their place in it. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to be out in the streets, but writing letters and whatever you can do, stay active and not complacent. And Eddie, I know that you touched on respecting our legacies and about digging deep. And then that's exactly what Ryan Donaldson has been doing for the last few years. So I'm going to bring Ryan on. Thanks, Eddie. We're going to get back.
Thank you.
We're going to get back to you in a little bit, but I'm going to bring Ryan on right now. Hey, Ryan.
Hi.
Oh gosh, my screen is doing something strange. I'm sorry, everyone. I'm going to try to get rid of it. Okay, wow. Ryan, I'm going to let you too, just, get going and share your slides too, because your story is a really important one and really fascinating too. So we'll let you tell it. And I know there's going to be some questions for you at the end of all of this. So we'll get going and I'm going to back away. Thanks, Ryan.
Great. Well, thank you, Stephanie. And thank you, Eddie, for telling those amazing stories as well. So I'm thrilled and honored for the opportunity to share my family's story of the Donaldsons and how we've come to the Pacific Northwest. And so if we move on to the next slide. So really, in terms of getting to understand my family's story and how we've come out west, really, what you see here on the screen is the cover of the Donaldson Odyssey, Footsteps to Freedom. This was written and edited by my relatives, Lillian Babe Donaldson Warren and her husband, Robert Bob Williams. They self-published this book, and it is really an incredible document to understand the origins of our family and, again, how we've made it out this way. Babe and Bob, they researched extensively. They traced relatives back to the 18th century. They obtained documents here in Seattle, in Alabama, in the National Archives, and we really are indebted to that contribution for having a better understanding. And if we move on to the next slide, thank you. So here's a photo of Lillian with her father, Henry Donaldson, so my great-granduncle. And, we're just so fortunate for being able to have this foundation of knowledge. And really what it's based on was deep research into vital records, property records, legal and military documents, and perhaps most importantly, our oral tradition, our intergenerational family stories. And so about 2 years ago, I began a collaboration with my relative, Al Butch Smith Jr., my father, Raymond Donaldson, and other family members to expand upon this knowledge and to incorporate other types of material, digitized newspapers, oral histories, and all kinds of things. So this is a photo taken in 1995. It was the first Donaldson, Bentley, Livingston family reunion. And what it clearly shows is we have a large family. And we all trace back to Jesse and Anna Smalley Donaldson. So these would be my great-great-great-grandparents. And they are the grandparents in some form to many of my relatives. Jesse and Anna had 8 children over a 16-year period, And then 7 of those children had their own branches or bands. So I'm part of the general, he was also known as J.J. Donaldson's band, and Butch is a part of George, also known as Sharkey's band. General and my great-great-grandmother, Louisa Nicholas Clark, then had 11 children. And so to keep kind of a focus on our research, we mainly have looked to our own bands, though we are wholly welcoming of information and collaboration across all the family lines. So who are Jesse and Anna Donaldson? Jesse, our family patriarch, was born enslaved in Hazel Green, Alabama in 1846 to the white plantation owner Levi Donaldson, and Sarah, Jesse's mother, who was enslaved. Levi inherited Sarah and her 2 daughters from his father-in-law, John Aminet, a French Huguenot who immigrated to the United States in 1776 and fought in the Revolutionary War. On the 1860 federal census, Jesse was listed as mulatto, and this photo shows the Donaldson Cemetery in Hazel Green that I actually had a chance to visit, which was quite a moving experience. So this image shows the original plantation house. So this is where Jesse spent the first 18 years of his life. And then when he turned 18, he walked out that front door and escaped the plantation, joining a recruiting party that was in Tennessee, and he joined the Union Army in the Civil War. Jesse fought bravely for the 15th Colored Infantry. His group primarily guarded munitions in the Nashville area. He sustained significant injuries. He was shot. At one point, the captain had hung him by his thumbs for reasons we're not sure. And he spent many years actually trying to obtain his pension following the war. And then after the war, he met Anna in Georgia. And it was during this time that they met Jim Shepherdson, also known as Shep or Big Jim, a politician and labor recruiter who worked with the Northwest Improvement Company. It's estimated that Jim recruited 800 African-American coal miners to Rosalind alone, and he was a spokesperson and a community leader for the community. This image is a map that was published to show the various areas where there are mining towns in Washington state. The red arrow shows Rosalind, and as you can see, it's organized by county to show the prevalence of all of these sites, and they follow the train lines that were established out into the state as well. This image is an advertisement for Rosalind Coal, and really is one indication among many of the central importance of coal as an energy source for the Seattle area. In 1890, over 450,000 tons of coal were produced in the Rosalind mines, which was about 80% of the output of all of King County, including Seattle. So this next image is one of my favorite photos of the Donaldson family. This is a photo that was taken in the early 1900s. Sharkey is in the back row, the second from the right. We believe that General is next to him on the left-hand side. And although we do not have any known photos of Jesse, he had passed on in 1904, there are times that I look very closely at this photo and I wonder if the man on the far right could be him. While the family was in Rosalind, they worked the mines, they farmed the land, they bartered and traded with their neighbors. General had, in 1910, a high yield of onions, amongst other crops that he was producing at that time. And this is an image from the Seattle Times in 1997. It's a photo from the 1920s that show the next generation of the Donaldsons. My great-grandfather, Ardith, is on the far left-hand side. And going into the 1920s, most of the family had moved on from Rosalind to Yakima, Seattle, Bellevue, looking for work, looking for other opportunities. This image here is a plat map that shows the original Donaldson home location on Montana Avenue and First Street in Rosalind. One of the things as I think through, all the different reasons for the family coming out, really looking to the fact that there is an opportunity for home ownership and being able to be entrepreneurial. General was the first family member of ours to move to Rosalind. We have the passenger list indicating that he came in May of 1891, and he was only 13 years old. It was while everyone was going through Minneapolis, Minnesota, that Pinkerton armed guards boarded the train. And it was at that point that they were then informed or realized that they were breaking a strike for the coal miners that were here. And I just think how harrowing it must have been, for General and for everyone aboard, to be pondering this as they were headed out this way. And there's a docudrama, the South by Northwest series, the Rosalind migration, that dramatizes this to kind of give a sense of what it would be like. And despite these challenges, our family really made the move for a glimpse of a better life. So here's an image that has General. He is standing with the hat on the left-hand side. And posing in front of the car is his son, William B. Donaldson. B in 1935 was briefly married to Lily Caton. Lily is one of the daughters of Horace and Susie Revels Caton. One very interesting point is that the Catons' Queen Anne style home located in Seattle's Capitol Hill neighborhood was just last week unanimously approved to be a city landmark. And the Catons, according to Dr. Quintard Taylor in The Forging of a Black Community, were the most prominent African-American couple in the Pacific Northwest by 1900. The Catons published the Seattle Republican newspaper in Catons Weekly. And one of the aspects of our research has really benefited from reviewing the digitized newspapers. And here's where we're adding more to the overall Donaldson Odyssey story and learning about new details. This is available on the Washington Digital Newspaper site. And so here's one article of many. I just had to pick one for this evening. And this shows the Rosalind sections. So there were local news sections that the Catons covered, providing much more detail about these communities. And so this particular article discusses Anna, the family matriarch, and Jesse's wife, and mentions how she's a leader of the Baptist Church, that she went to a national convention in Cincinnati, and that in 1902, she visited her or our family in Tennessee. And so, what we see here is everything from these types of visits to legal cases, other types of social events, medical maladies, all of it's there. And it's really been an incredible experience to learn more through this review. And it's also something that, in addition to the Donaldson family, it talks about many of the other African-American families that were these pioneers of the Pacific Northwest. And so one way to think about the Donaldson's family experience can come from inspiration from this quote from Isabella or Izzy Donaldson in her senior year yearbook in 1935 for Cleveland High School. Izzy is a part of Sharkey's band. She married Al Smith, the renowned photographer, who are the parents of Butch. And she says, "I'll be sad for no one." And I think there's a lot of different ways to take that. But in this particular case, just thinking about the fact that despite all of these hardships, despite coming into Washington State with that mindset of, breaking the strike and facing all of this hostility, that there was this opportunity that the family seized that for all of us as descendants, we benefit from. And we're so fortunate and grateful for that. And on the topic of gratitude, there are many people and organizations to thank. In particular, Stephanie, thank you so much for all of your help and advisement along the way. Everyone has been great to share time, attention, resources, knowledge. This list is incomplete. And I want to extend, the thank you to you all for, being able to listen tonight. And before I go, there is a clip that I would like to play, and it is of Henry Donaldson, my great-granduncle, from a documentary that was done called The Forgotten Pioneers that was put out by Cairo in 1988. In this clip, Henry talks about his experiences growing up, and to be able to hear him and to think of, my grandfather, Raymond Donaldson, and his mannerisms being so similar, and to have that first person account is really remarkable.
Differently.
It was rough, I can tell you that much.
What do you mean rough?
Well, I mean, you weren't allowed to go a lot of places.
That was Seattle by the 1920s. Henry Donaldson is 78 now. Cataracts haven't obstructed his view of the past. Donaldson was a child of the mines. Coal had been discovered by the 1880s. Rosalind, Franklin, and Black Diamond became mining towns. In 1888, blacks were brought up by the trainloads recruited from all over the South when white miners went out on strike.
And that's how my dad come out on one of those trains. Now, I heard there was 3 train loads came out, but he was on one of them. I don't know which one he was on.
Donaldson's dad came in 1900. He was only 13 years old at the time. It was a tough time. The strikebreakers needed guns for protection.
See, number 3 mine was the biggest mine in Rosa. And that's where they had all the trouble started, was number 3 mine. And that's when they brought the strikebreakers in. They went into number 3 mine.
When the strike was finally settled, the black workers moved on to other mines and more labor unrest. Eventually, all the strikes were settled, and a lot of black men were out of work. Some, like Donaldson's father, went east to farm. Most, though, drifted to Seattle.
Oh, Ryan, okay, I was just ready for the next clip. That's wonderful. That's really great history, and your genealogy search always motivates me to, want to get my stuff out and get busy again, building that family tree. And once you get the bug, it's like no going back, right? So really appreciating your story, and I can't wait, when we talk again to hear what else you've discovered, because you just keep digging and it just keeps getting better. So thank you, Ryan. And we'll come back. Hopefully we'll circle back with some questions. Thank you. So that leads me to the idea of standing on shoulders, and standing on the shoulders of family is something that many of us can identify with. And many of us will be able to identify with Chardonnay Beaver. And the story that she's going to share is generational, and it's inspiring. So Chardonnay, want to join us? Hi.
Hi.
I know you've got so much to share too. Your story is rich. It's something that's evolving too. So
Yes.
I'm going to back away and let you go ahead and share what you have to share tonight.
Yes, thank you so much, MOHAI and Black Heritage Society. It's a pleasure. To briefly describe myself, I am a Black young woman. My hair is slicked back in a bun. I'm wearing this creamy beige blazer, and I'm smiling. So good afternoon or good evening. My name is Chardonnay Beaver, and amongst many things, I am proud to be the granddaughter of Fitzgerald Red Beaver. Since childhood, I always understood my grandpa to be this public, influential figure, somewhat larger than life. I admired the lasting impact that the facts has had on generations, young and old. His story always seemed so distant, yet near. Someone I never met, yet he is a part of me. Next slide. So let's get right into it. Born in Martinsville, Virginia on January 18th, 1922, he was born into an interracial relationship. His mother white, his father Black. Being that he was the only child, his mother instilled values of education, for she was a school teacher. He completed high school in Martinsville, Virginia, and he later attended A&T College in Greensboro, North Carolina. Now, fast forwarding to his life, next slide. My grandfather's career in media and finding his voice was always along the way. So first, he started his radio career in North Bend, Oregon, and continued radio and public relations training in Los Angeles, California. By 1955, he returned to Portland and developed a radio personality on his radio show, Eager Beaver, along with establishing a magazine. Throughout the years, I've had many community members come up to me and share their stories of him bringing Ike and Tina Turner down to Portland for concerts at his station, back to school drives, just being a figure and constantly being generous to those in which he cared for, which was his community. And to that point, in 1961, he moved to Seattle to manage KZAM-FM, the first Black-owned radio station in the Northwest. KZAM, as some would refer to the station, was a broadcast facility, small and modest, located on 24th and Union in Seattle's predominantly Black Central District. The station featured Northwest radio pioneers like jazz connoisseur, the late Bob Summerize, and other personalities like Larry Braxton and Mr. Century. However, in 1 week, my grandpa decided to publish. He found a printer, sold advertising, gathered news, and went to the press. And on September 7th, 1961, that same year, the Facts newspaper was established, appearing as this pink 16-page metro-sized chronicle of Black heritage, reporting the excellence in transitions within the Black community. Next slide. And here you can see an image of the Facts. We have that historic, iconic car all mounted on top of our roof, and the billboard, the letterboard, and where we put all our information. And so by 1962, he left KZAM, and I quote, "The job just was not for him." My grandfather was 40 years old when he left KZAM and a year into the Facts. Next slide. And so during this period, throughout the course of the Facts, I mean, we've been blessed to survive recessions and echoes of housing discrimination and so many other forms of oppression and economic injustice. But the civil rights movement and the activism within journalism during that period was capturing our stories and singing our praises. The location of the Facts, again, it was on East Cherry and then Empire Way, which is now East Cherry and Martin Luther King Jr. Way. Shout out to Eddie Rye. That was allowing us to be a hub and capturing the stories and essence of Black people, Black news, our day-to-day lives. And in the paper, there was features of columnists like Harold Murphy's Unbroken Chain, which was a poetry column, Kwame, also known as Amari Garrett's 40 Acres and a Mule, which was a critical analysis of the status of the Black community, history, and heritage. And then Dave Mann, a great friend of the family and my father's godfather, he was a former athlete, Man's Bites and Pieces, a sports column. However, my grandfather found his own right of activism when writing his own column titled, first, it was Right On, from the publisher's pen, and then later transitioning from that to From the Publisher's Pen. It served as a vehicle for him to state pieces and topics like Black history, housing disparities, the necessity of education, and the overall progress of Seattle's Black and Brown communities. Next slide. The facts served as a drum of the village. So you have to remember that during this time, there are waves of, whether it be folks coming in from the South during the Great Migration, or also folks just settling in. And although he was in his 40s, developing the paper, creating new vehicles for other Black journalists, it was a pivotal time in history in which there was no social media, and Blacks were able to use their voice through this vehicle. And so 3 words that I could describe my grandfather as would be tenacious, precise, and generous. My grandfather believed that there was value in people, which was a message that my father, his youngest son, would pass along to me. His awareness of where the community was speaks to his precision in his relationships. He had great relationships with politicians, ranging to youth in the juvenile detention center. He genuinely cared, and anyone who walked into the office felt that love. My grandfather, during his lifetime, received over 100 community service awards. In addition, my grandpa also was a teacher. Mr. Beaver, as folks would call him, he was a teacher and a mentor to many. I mean, considering publishers like Chris Bennett of the Seattle Medium newspaper and Bernard Foster of the Scanner newspaper out of Portland, Oregon. He gave them and many the opportunity to explore the realm and craft of journalism and storytelling and art and photography. He also formed lasting relationships with other Black media outlets along the West Coast, from areas like Southern California to Arizona. Next slide. So you can see this is a picture of the legendary Dee Charlene in her salon with 2 women, one reading the facts paper and then the medium paper. And it just speaks to the echoing legacy of Black media in Seattle. Next slide. So again, echoing that point, my grandpa received so many different awards. This was actually our family home right next door to our property on East Cherry and now MOHAI Way. Yes, and he was a legendary golfer in some ways, amateur as well, but he would travel up and down the West Coast competing. And I would say and have to argue that his treasure and his greatest trophy was his family. My grandfather was married, moving to Seattle to Chardonnay Beaver, a respected beautician and entrepreneur. Next slide. However, he later married my Nana, Elizabeth, and they wed and raised their 3 children, Levon, Marla, and Dennis, in the Central District. As well as his older children who lived outside of Washington, his adult children, which included Pat, Loran, Emilio, and Lanita. My grandpa truly enjoyed golfing. Again, he traveled, and because of that reason, my father was a member of First State Junior Golf Team, which allowed him to become a dynamic golfer because the organization was valuing Black golfers and allowing them to compete in a sport that usually doesn't include folks who look like me. Next slide. And so I have spent a lot of my life in this office, a lot of my early life. And on January 1st, 1992, my grandfather passed. This office symbolizes home for my family, along from it being a hub and a historic site for the Black community. When he passed at the age of 69 due to long-term health concerns, the community grieved a mentor and a teacher and a friend and a leader. But what I hope you get from this message today is that he was also a father, a husband, a friend. And my Nana now had to take on the role of now being not only a widow and a single mother to a teenage son, which was my father, but also stepping up and embarking on the journey of becoming a matriarch and taking on her husband's dream, which we know as the Facts newspaper. Next slide, please. And so this is an image of my father, my 2 siblings and myself. And you can see that family and our legacy, the business, is woven into our unit. My father, after my grandfather passed, had took on later along the lines, took on the chief and editor role. And today the chief and editor role is now with my auntie Marla Beaver. But you can see that during this period, not only was how the Black community absorbed media changing, but the era of digital era changed, right? So we have the 2000s where the way that in which we perceive and understand media is no longer the same. With cell phones, you don't need a 16-page layout, but you need something that's still gonna get to the essence of our community. And that's what we try to do. We pick up where the daily paper leaves off, in the words of my grandpa. Next slide. And so this is an image of my family, not all of us. This is actually probably sometime we were all getting together. But my grandfather, although he's not here, his legacy still resides with us, whether it be us doing layout together or joining each other in family conversations and moments. This is what he missed, but yet this is a part of him. Next slide, please. And here I am, I'm a student at the University of Washington studying political science and communications. And somehow throughout my life, although I've known him to be this huge figure, I miss the points and pieces of him. I've seen my family grieve their father and their husband, and yet it felt so distant until, next slide, until now. I'm a columnist in the Facts with my column, Words of Wisdom by Shar, Wow by Shar. And it's been a pleasure to be able to share his story with honor. I understand my grandfather to be a man that valued people. And one of the sayings in which he lived by was, I should not pass this way but once. Therefore, any good I can do or any kindness I can show, let me do it now, for I should not pass this way again. And that is a true message of what he stood by as a teacher and a leader. I know that our time is short, but I thank you guys for coming on here again. Thank you, MOHAI. Thank you, Black Heritage Society. And thank you to my Nana, who's the reason why I'm here today. Thank you.
Oh, Chardonnay, I'm just, I was getting a little emotional there at the end. I mean, honestly, the community media legacy that you continue to build and shape is something I know that I want to follow. And I still pick up my Facts newspaper. I pick up the hard copy every chance I get. So keep doing the good work, and much love to your family. Thank you. And we'll circle back to you in a minute. Hopefully here with some questions. I see there's questions coming in. So we'll just keep moving. I know this is fast and furious, everyone, and all of these stories have been so rich, but I want to be able to introduce you at this time to Thomas Robinson. The root of our stories and the legacies can be traced in our genealogy. Are you curious about that? I mean, did you know that there is a Black genealogy research group that meets here in Seattle? One of the ties that binds BHS to BGRG is the founder, Jacqueline Lawson, because she is a public historian and published author who was the founder of BHS, co-founder in 1977. You heard Carol say that earlier tonight. So Thomas, we both stand on the shoulders of Jackie Lawson. So welcome, and please tell us some about the Black Genealogy Research Group.
Well, first I'd like to say it's been a rich time. The stories, Chardonnay, Ryan, Eddie, and Chardonnay, I think, in fact, I live across the street from one of your co-workers, Chris Bennett. He and his family just live right across the street from me. So I have to let him know that I was in a session with you this evening. But I'm the new chair for the new president for the Black Genealogy Research Group of Seattle. Jacqueline Lawson, as well as Edith Gibson Giles. They both were the founders way back in the early 90s. the members have been assisting one another on sharing their stories, information gathering, research techniques, expertise and experiences related to individual journeys in their African American roots. And we currently are meeting virtually on Zoom, like almost everyone, the first Saturdays of the month from 11 to 1. So this is a personal invitation to everyone online to feel free to send us a message via our Facebook page to Black Genealogy Research Group. And our meetings are free for drop-ins, but we're also welcoming newcomers. And so we would, it takes a village to kind of get things going. So we would hope at some point you would join the Black Genealogy Group. Our next meeting is coming up Saturday, March 6th, and we'll be featuring storytelling. And in April, we're putting on the final touches of having a guest speaker. I can't give you the details at the moment, but check in with us. And again, it's just been great to be here. I can remember transferring up to the University of Washington from Cal State, and all I heard was Eddie Rye, Eddie Rye, Eddie Rye. And at the time, we were trying to get the Black Student Union established at the University of Washington, and he was instrumental in that as well. So just want to say thanks for all of the stories. Ryan, your story about your family has been just really inspiring. And again, Chardonnay, thank you so much. Thank you, Stephanie.
Yeah, Thomas, I know that I've been joining your group. I try to pop in whenever I can. And, you know, I'm so inspired by that group. They're such a great group and really easy with sharing the research and pointing you in the right direction. So I would encourage anyone who has interest in discovering their roots to please, you know, join the Zoom with the research group. They are just a really fabulous group. And congratulations, Thomas, on your presidency.
Thank you so much. Thank
Okay.
you.
So, you know, here we are at 7:36, and I've been seeing some questions here in the Q&A. I don't know, how are we doing, Rachel? Do we have time to get to some of these, to get to a few questions? No, I don't hear Rachel. So I'm gonna go ahead and look. There's, gosh, you know, there's a question here for you, Eddie, and I don't know if the rest of our guests you're able to see into the Q&A. I'm going to welcome you back on the screen, all of the guests. And there's a number of questions here, and why don't we pull one for each one of you? And Eddie, there's a question here that says, what is your proudest accomplishment and contribution?
I think my proudest accomplishment really is honoring Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., not only with the street, but also after it being in 1986, after Ronald Reagan had proclaimed the King holiday the third Monday, 1986, Ron's King County Council member at that time, Ron Sims, and Bruce Olson, Republican, they sponsored a proclamation to name the name for Dr. King. But in 1999, 13 years later, at the annual MLK event, I put a motion on the floor that it's been 13 years, no one knows this is King County, and Larry Gossett was to seek the remedy to change the names. It turns out only the state could change the name of a county, and to his credit, then State Senator Adam Klein introduced legislation 8 times, and it finally passed in 2005, and Governor Christine Gregoire came up to the King County Martin Luther King Jr. courthouse and signed the legislation. But then it took us another 18 months to get his picture. They didn't want to use Dr. King's image as an official logo. Some council members had a picture of the county courthouse, And I said, that is not Martin Luther King Jr. So, but anyway, we prevailed. And you see Dr. King's picture on all the metro buses, all the county stuff, including the sheriff's cars.
Yeah, Eddie, that was some really great work that you did and rallying the community. And I often wear my Martin Luther King pin, with much pride. So thank you so much for that activism. I remember that well. There's a question here for you, Ryan, too, about your research and your journey, where it says, were there any discoveries about your family that surprised you? And if so, did it change the scope of your research?
Yeah, that's a great question. One thing that that going into this project, that I first encountered is like a lot of documents to try to understand my family. The military records, the reason that we have this information about Jesse is he was fighting for his pension for years. He actually didn't get it until shortly before he passed on. So, that was kind of the initial element. And then what we have in terms of family photos. But really what was surprising was these incredible oral histories that really fleshed out and added so many additional dimensions to, kind of my initial understanding. And I really want to thank Esther Mumford for her contributions to this. I know she is a beloved figure to many, especially with, the panelists today. But, in terms of this research, Ms. Mumford actually responded when I had reached out in regards to, trying to find out more about my family. And the thing that floored me was in reaching out to her was her saying, "Oh, well, I interviewed your family." And so she then directed me to an interview that she did. And this was an interview with Al Smith Sr., the incredible photographer, and Izzy Donaldson Smith, my great-grandaunt. So it was really amazing to have that all come to fruition. And so I contacted the Washington State Archives, and within a few days, I had the transcript and the audio recording. So here I am listening to them in their own words, talk about their experiences. And, one thing just as a mini surprise within that was that several times Miss Mumford and Al Smith would ask Izzy about talking about her childhood in Rosalind, and she didn't really want to talk about it. She was more interested in talking about, coming into Seattle. And when you think about when she was born, there really weren't that many African Americans left in Rosalind at that time. So it makes it was more exciting to be in Seattle for a variety of reasons as well. So, the idea that we want to really consider, how memories and how, those of us that have them and those of us that are seasoned in our years can contribute and add much more to that overall picture.
Yeah, that's a great story. And I know we often talk about going down the rabbit hole, right, Ryan? I mean, because once you get started, so that's really fabulous to hear about your conversation with Esther and, where that led you. So thank you. And Chardonnay, there's a question here too. And this is something I'm wondering is, what are the ways for younger people like yourself to get involved in the Black community in Seattle?
Oh my gosh, there's so much. There's so many ways to get involved. What I will say first is that, again, going back to what my dad has instilled into me, there's value in people. So you have to have a genuine care for how you're approaching the community. It's not easy to be front and center, and that's why I applaud people, give them their roses while they're here, like Mr. Rye, like yourself, Stephanie Toliver. There's so many who have done the work. So what I would say is meet with elders. Service is a way of bringing healing and unifying our community. Meet with your elders. I've done stuff with the Roots Family Picnic. It's been a complete pleasure being a part of that. And that was a way that I could say, okay, I'm gaining knowledge, but I'm also taking away from my own ideas of what this community should be and adding to it as a younger person, right? Building onto that foundation that was already there for me. And as far as media, well, come down to the facts and talk to us. If you got a column, if you have an idea, come down and let's talk.
Okay, well, I love that. You put it out there now, to the world. There's a number of questions here, and I know that earlier when I was talking to Rachel, we thought that maybe what we could do here, and if our guests agree, is that we gather, these questions and then send them out to you, and if you would be willing to respond, because I know we're all like kind of looking at our watches, and we really wish we had another hour or 2 hours, turn it into a seminar, you know. We're just going to have to do more of this, and with our partners at MOHAI, I think we can make it happen. So thank you so much, guests, for coming on and sharing with us tonight. And I hope that it instills, just a little bit with everyone to want to dig deeper into their own histories. So thank you, thank you, thank you, and thank you. And MOHAI, so much appreciation for you. I love you. And I'm going to toss this back to Rachel. And just to say, Rachel, Nicole, Wendy, woohoo! Thank you. Carol.
Thank you. Oh my goodness. I just I kind of am speechless. I'm still taking in all these stories. I feel so honored that is able to hear from all of you. And I'm grateful that this is recorded. All of you, we will be sending out this link because each one of you, Eddie and Ryan and Chardonnay, had such unique and insightful things to say. And it just I'm always struck by how deep the history is of this place, and so much that, I work at a history museum, but there's so much I don't know. And then also always struck by how personal history is, and how pulling those threads back into the past really gives you such more of a sense of your family. And so thank you to Thomas for being here and talking with how people can really go and do that research to find more of that family history. It's just amazing. And so for everyone here, I know Thomas was I saw somebody put the email for the Genealogy Society. So if you want to, could you say again when the next meeting was?
The next meeting is March 6th at 11 o'clock. We usually meet from 11 to 1. And you can reach us through seattle.gov.
Great. And then last but not least, I just want to give the biggest thank you to the Black Heritage Society of Washington State. I mean, I think it was either Stephanie or Carol was saying that it's like being a married couple. And I just want to second that. We are so happy to be in partnership with you. And this has just been, one of MOHAI's longest partnerships. And we learned so much from you. We learned so much from the programming we get to do. We miss being able to be on site with you down in Georgetown, and we look forward to being able to, come look at historic photos together. And that just, and to everyone here, we're going to drop the link for BHS in the chat too. So please reach out to them, do your own genealogy and family history, or just in general to learn about the wealth of history and material there is. So thank you.
So overwhelming, everyone.
It's really true.
Right.
So
we'll
yeah,
see
exactly.
you on the radio, Eddie.
All right.
So thank you, and have a wonderful evening, everyone. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you soon. All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.